Hello, Trail Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Today's interview was kind of mind-blowing for me because trying to gain muscle in the gym has always been a point of frustration. There's so many health benefits when it comes to having lean muscle mass. And I know men and women alike, whatever age you are, there's different reasons and different health benefits to having more lean muscle mass. But it takes a long time and a lot of work in the gym to develop those muscles. As you listen to today's interview and take in all the information, if you're motivated or interested in purchasing any of his products, he gave us a coupon code, and I thought that was really cool of him. So the coupon code is LTH, as in Learn True Health. And you'll be able to, all the information will be in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com, as well as in the interview. So just remember, his coupon code for all of our listeners to get a discount is LTH. Excellent. Well, enjoy today's interview, and please share it with your friends who you know would be interested in learning a technique that doesn't require you to lift weights. You don't even have to lift weights. You can do other activities like flexion, extension, or just walking. And with his technique, you can actually gain muscle mass simply with walking, or you could incorporate it into what you do in the gym. But for those who are afraid or unable to go to the gym, this is an amazing way to build muscle at whatever fitness level you are, even if you're injured or bedridden. It's just absolutely so cool. So enjoy today's interview. Please share it with those friends you know would love to learn this information. Let's help as many people as we can to achieve optimal health. Let's turn this ripple into a tidal wave and help. My goal is to help 1 million people to learn true health. Excellent. Enjoy today's interview. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 275. Today's going to be a very interesting interview. We have with us Kusha Karvandi. He founded an interesting device that seems like it's the answer to everything I've been seeking in the gym. So if you're the type of person that wants to build muscle, but you've had problems in the past, or you don't want to put the heavy strain on your joints, then you will love today's interview. I think it's quite ingenious. I'm really excited to hear your story. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You know, we were introduced by one of my favorite people at Sunlighten, and she emailed me and said, I just met this guy that you have to absolutely have on your show. He's got just the coolest story. And so we basically have a friend at Sunlighten that thinks that you should be on the show. So I'm definitely going to have to write her an email and thank her for hooking us up. Do you have a Sunlighten? Is that
I
how
do.
she discovered you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have Sunlighten here at home, and I'm a big proponent of heat therapy in general. And so, yeah, I think we've maybe talked about them on our podcast as well as in our on our blog and with our community. We're a big proponent of tools like heat therapy with the Sunlighten Sauna, just as much as we talk about BFR and these other types of biohacks.
Yes, you're getting into the biohacks. I love listening to podcasts out of Silicon Valley because you always hear about the weirdest thing these guys are doing that turns out to be just ingenious to um trick, now I want to say trick the body, but to, figure out how to get the body to do what we want. And it's some things they come up with are really interesting, like the cryotherapy, the, getting into these tanks that make basically would give you hypothermia, and just all the really neat things that they do in the biohacking world. But you've invented something that's so simple, so easy to use, that someone could do it at home, and that it stimulates the body in what seems like a very natural way to create muscle. And that's having more muscle mass. I know from my health background, the more muscle mass we have, the healthier our immune system is, and especially those who are getting into their senior years. And that's one concern, is losing muscle mass, because if they were to come down with like a cold or pneumonia, they see a correlation between the more muscle mass we have and the ab- ab- um, the likelihood of a surviving infections and surviving times of famine and having more energy. And so there's actually a correlation between longevity, overall health, and muscle mass. Now, your background as a personal trainer, you have over 10,000 hours of one-on-one sessions as a personal trainer. I'd love to hear your
Hmm.
story. Let's get into what, first of all, what motivated you, what led you to be passionate about being a personal trainer, and then how did you get into wanting to help people with BFR training?
Yeah, it's funny. When I first started in working in a gym, I was actually working part time in as a membership sales guy at a gym in San Diego, and this was part time while I was going to school at UCSD. I was gonna take the medical route, and I wanted to be a doctor, and I didn't like the sales aspect at all. It's not wasn't my thing, and I only did that for maybe a month when I realized that I wanted to transition into personal training. I was a little concerned at the time because I thought it was going to be a big time commitment for what I was able to afford with school and everything, but I was really always passionate about health and fitness and working out. And I remember working with a trainer for kind of a short period of time, in high school. And so I always thought it would be kind of fun and be kind of cool to be a personal trainer. And so I just kind of got into it really by accident. And then, I found really a real passion for it after the first like 3 to 6 months of doing personal training, that I realized I liked it a lot more than I cared for, traditional medicine, at least as a profession. And I just found a career as a personal trainer, and started excelling in that career, and did that for several years at a big box gym in San Diego. And then they kind of moved me around the country, and I started managing gyms and managing teams, and hired and developed hundreds of trainers around the country. And a lot of my success wasn't really so much because I knew business, because I was in my early 20s. I didn't really know anything about business, but a lot of it was because I was just obsessed with the science, and I was obsessed with getting results and being able to kind of help a wide variety of different clients, from the guy who wanted to gain muscle to the maybe the older person who wanted to just improve their mobility, to somebody who just wanted to lose weight. I was really obsessed with trying to find solutions for everybody. And so in doing that, I was really obsessed with education. I started amassing all these different certifications, all these nationally accredited certifications. And, it is that all thing, all these different certifications I had, NASM, NSCA, ACE, whatever it may be, they all were kind of speaking through the lens of biomechanics. So they all kind of look at the human body as being this biomechanical machine, almost like being a robot. And to a certain extent, that's kind of true. The body, we have something called proprioception, which has to do with the body's nerve endings and kind of these feedback mechanisms that help us move and help us lift weights and do that sort of thing. But there's also this overlooked component that I didn't really know of at the time, which is the neurology, the neuroscience of it all. And nobody in personal training, nobody was really talking about that at that time. And so, I think kind of by accident, I stumbled upon kind of this science called functional neurology, which is kind of like neurology, but it's more of kind of an applied neurology that was just made it made a lot more sense to me as a personal trainer, being kind of a body guy, being a hands-on, exercise science type of person. It made a lot more sense to me. And what it did is it basically kind of took a top-down approach. It looked at, how does this exercise program influence the brain, or how can we get the brain to influence the goal of fat loss or muscle gain? And so when we talk about things like biohacking, what is biohacking? Biohacking is just trying to leverage tools or technologies to help you get results more efficiently. So a lot of times biohacks are really utilizing, ideas or concepts that already existed, like cold therapy already existed, but then leveraging a technology like a cryotherapy chamber to speed that up, to make it more efficient, make it more effective.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of a lot of what I was learning when I started diving into functional neurology. I was learning about things like vision training, for example. Nobody in exercise or in the gyms is talking about your eyes and exercising the eyes to help performance or speed or strength or any of that. Nobody talks about that. Everyone's talking about, mechanics. You go to Roadrunner Sports, and you want to get a pair of shoes. What do? They put you on a treadmill. They use a camera to analyze your foot pattern, your gait, your heel strike. But they're not. Nobody says, wait, maybe it's your peripheral vision, maybe it's your foveal vision, maybe it's your depth perception. There's things like visual skills that you have to have in order to have optimal performance, and that includes strength. So I was just really fascinated by these concepts that, at the time I was completely overlooking. And as I went deeper down the rabbit hole with it, I realized, it made a lot of sense to me why I wasn't able to help a lot of clients early on, why like many trainers, I became kind of stuck when it came to helping clients with shoulder pain or back pain, or people who were plateauing in their strength. They were plateauing with their squats or with their bench press, whatever it may be. I was plateauing with them and kind of hitting a wall because I was taking the same approach as everyone else, which is that biomechanical approach, which is very limited because if you don't know why your brain is controlling the body in a certain way, then you know how to fix it. And the beauty is with this functional neurology approach, it allows you to continue to try multiple things. You can continue to try different assessments and different types of um, tools and techniques to try to analyze and kind of narrow down what the root issue is and what the and potentially what the course of action should be to make progress or correct it. Whereas with the traditional approach, you're kind of limited. You try a few things, in the exercise world, for example. You might do a functional movement screen. You might assess somebody's overhead squat assessment. There's a kind of a small battery of movement assessments that you can do, and if you can't find a solution within those assessments, you kind of just give up and and refer them to somebody else. And even with functional neurology, you're still going to refer out. You're never going to try to do everything on your own. But I was just fascinated with how much more options it gave the practitioner and the client or patient by being able to take this kind of neuroscience perspective. So that's kind of where everything in terms of the BFR began. Because once I went down that rabbit hole, I started learning about blood flow restriction training and how powerful and useful of a technique it is for almost anybody.
When you first became a personal trainer and you were still kind of deciding whether you're going to be a doctor or not, do you have a specific incident that happened? Was there an aha moment, or was it like a collection over time and you just kept going, wow, I love getting results in the gym? Or was there one particular result that you got that had you go, this is it, this is where I'm going, this is my path?
Yeah, I don't think it was any one moment. I think it was just kind of for me at the time, I think a lot of it was that I loved being in that environment. I loved the energy and just the feel of being in the gym versus being in a hospital setting or a clinical setting. So I just knew for me that it wasn't going to be the direction for me. And that's kind of when I transitioned and went down a different trajectory. But I think it was the thing that led me away specifically over traditional medicine, and going towards kind of this almost Eastern medicine approach with functional neurology and some of these other aspects were, just realizing that, traditional medicine has many pitfalls. Traditional medicine is really good for emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
I'd want to be in the United States and go to a regular hospital if there was an emergency situation. But in terms of improving quality of life and optimal performance, traditional medicine has many pitfalls because, when you go to your doctor, your typical scenario at a doctor is you go there, you meet with the doctor for maybe 8 to 10 minutes. They don't ask you any questions, so they're not taking a deep enough history in order to actually find the root cause. But instead, they analyze a few things and then tell you what you need to do, which is usually referring you out for surgery or prescribing medications. And I always kind of had a background of really being into more of natural approaches with things, whether it be exercise or food or even maybe some supplements. I was never really a big fan of taking medications. And so that always kind of deterred me that these are the things that they're prescribing. I mean, how many doctors are really prescribing a specific type of exercise program for somebody who needs it? I don't know any doctors that prescribe blood flow restriction training except for maybe physical therapists who understand it and are taught it in school, or even nutrition. There's barely any nutritional education for medical doctors, which I think is crazy because when you look at the human body, everything is connected. And when you silo the human body into all these segments and then try to teach a professional like a doctor each segment, without teaching them kind of how the sum of the parts becomes a whole and how they're all related, then of course they're going to refer you to a drug before they refer you to trying nutrition and supplementation to correct the issue, or something as simple as changing maybe your sleep environment to improve your sleep, rather than saying, oh, maybe you just need Balsamra or Ambien. And
Oh,
it's like, wait, what about stress levels? What about your lifestyle? What about trying all these other things before just jumping into that? And I wasn't really seeing that being taught or practiced.
and it still isn't. It's
Yeah.
just, isn't it amazing? I am so thankful for the podcast movement and other mediums like YouTube that allow us to connect with people like you to learn this, because I mean I had okay quality sleep, and then I started learning all these amazing things that I wouldn't have had access to back in the day when the only really person you saw was a doctor. And doing something very simple changes like putting blackout curtains in our room, um stop looking at devices like screens right at sunset, and just a few other things called sleep hygiene, right, making it a better environment like you said. Immense changes. My son went from waking up at the crack of dawn, like getting up at waking us up at like 4:30, which is ridiculous, to sleeping in till 7:30, just because we made some very easy changes that were, frankly, all of us should do.
Mhm.
um and God only knows what would happen down the road, as he grew up, if a doctor would have put him on some kind of drug, or what would happen to his development because like long-term chronic lack of sleep, what that does to the body. So there you were for years and years. You were loving helping people get real results, and you loved that, diving into um all the different things you can do, because I love that you said, one client would be like an older person wanting more mobility, and then the next client wants weight loss, the next client wants more muscle. Each one has different health issues or different areas of their life they want to improve, and you get to help them troubleshoot and figure out what can be done in and out of the gym to help them achieve those their life goals, and the quality of their life. And what led you to discover BFR training? Was there something specific that you went, "Oh my gosh, this is it. I gotta dive into this."
Yeah, I was actually at the time I was reading one of the I frequently will read many of the journals that are out there, and one of these was the journal Strength and Conditioning had published a recent article about blood flow restriction training, and I'd never heard about it. And so it's one of those things. The first time you hear even that phrase blood flow restriction training, you think, oh wow, this has got to be bad for you. Why would you want to restrict blood flow? It seems very counterintuitive. And so out of all the, different research studies and different articles that were in this journal, that one popped out immediately to me at the time, because I'd never, come across this, didn't know anything about it. So that's where it really all began. And this must have been 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. And that got me really interested in what it was and what it could do. And when I started looking into it, I realized that this was something that has actually been around for decades. It's something that has, over 25 years of research, over 200 studies on it, and it was originally developed by a Japanese doctor to help his patients prevent atrophy. These are patients that couldn't really do a whole lot. They couldn't go to the gym and do heavy squats. These are people who could barely do any movements. And so he was using blood pressure cuffs on their limbs in order to have them do maybe just simple flexion or extension, just simple muscle contraction, really nothing fancy. They could be just sitting there, just flexing their muscles. And he was seeing tremendous results in terms of preventing their atrophy. And it made its way, of course, into the bodybuilding world, because they wanted to use this to gain size and gain strength. And so in the 90s, maybe even before that, the bodybuilding community started adopting this to, use this as a tool to be able to gain size and strength without lifting heavy weight. And there's many reasons, obviously, why that would be important, because if you lift heavy all the time, it can take a toll not only on the body, but also on the brain. Your nervous system will be extremely taxed if you just try to go heavier and heavier week after week, year after year, especially because the average person has a life outside of the gym, and you have stressors outside of the gym. And you have other things that are going to play a role in your recovery and your joint movement and your posture. So I started to realize how valuable BFR could be to pretty much anybody who wanted to feel better, look better, whether they wanted to, get rid of pain, improve mobility and flexibility, gain size, gain strength, gain muscle tone. It just has so many different, applications.
So did you, after, learning about it, did you go out and do it yourself? Put some blood pressure cuffs on your arms and try it out for yourself?
Yeah, exactly. At the time, and the only things that were available, publicly to use for this form of training were expensive devices that were really designed for, clinics and medical doctors for the most part, and they're in the thousands of dollars. And they're excellent tools because you can get extremely precise and standardize them, which is probably important for insurance purposes and that sort of thing for a medical professional. But I thought, well, this isn't really feasible for an average person like me or anybody else to put this thing on, or more or less buy it. And so I thought, okay, well, what are people using out there? And after doing some research, I saw people are using medical tourniquets, like cheap, flimsy medical tourniquets, or they're using, knee wraps, ace bandages, all of which have their pitfalls because, number one, they have kind of a variety of different widths and elasticity, which may be more or less optimal based on what the research are showing. There's kind of a sweet spot for what you want in terms of width, the width of the cuff and the elasticity, the amount of pressure you want to be able to achieve, as well as just the simplicity of being able to apply it with one hand. A knee wrap is almost impossible to very quickly and easily tie around one arm because you tie this around your upper arm. To tie it by yourself with one hand is almost impossible. You'd have to have a workout partner help you, and even then, without some kind of graded marking system on the actual cuff itself, there's no way to really know if you're symmetrical from limb to limb. So you could be developing your arms and your legs, disproportionately, very easily. You could do that. So that's when I knew. I said, there's got to be something out there. And I tried to research, and there was really nothing out there. Even today, there's really nothing out there on the market that has a combination of both the proper width, the proper, amount of elasticity to achieve the pressure necessary, as well as the marking system, which is, I'd say, the most important part to allow you to actually have symmetry and consistency. So that way you can say, okay, last time I tightened to this position on my last workout, so now I know where to pick up where I left off on this next workout, or in between sets, even in intro workout.
Is that what motivated you to create your own bands? Did you start playing with materials at home and making your own bands? How did you, what had you transition to making your own?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we just started, testing with different materials that, we were sourcing from either the US or overseas, and we were just playing with just kind of different types of elastic, different types of rigid materials. What we were finding is that, the elastic type of materials tend to be best for most people. Everyone has shapes, body densities, and preferences. Some people like something a little more rigid. So we actually have, over time, we've developed a wide variety of styles and types of bands. But our most popular bands have essentially a 2 inch width, if we're talking about upper body, and 2 to 3 inch width for lower body. And they're elastic, and they have, most of them have a marking system on there. So that way, you can look at the number you tighten to on one limb, and you can make it symmetrical on the other limb. And our most popular newest bands, our Pro X bands, we've developed and patented an all new one-way kind of pull to tighten buckle. It's a pinch-free design, so you don't get pinched with this type of buckle when you're tightening. And it's designed to be used with one hand. So you just literally slide the band up onto your upper arm, and by yourself, you just pull to tighten it, kind of like a tourniquet. You just pull it, and it tightens and holds it in place. It has springs to hold the lever mechanism in place and keep the bands tight. And then we also have a patented, adjustable Velcro. So we have Velcro on there where the Velcro on the band itself is actually adjustable. So you can kind of move it to fit, your preference and your body shape. So yeah, we tried to make this as kind of one size fits all for as many people as we can, to make it really easy for them, especially as their body changes. Their body might get bigger, might get smaller, depending on what their goals are. So we wanted to make something that would be, easy to use, but also last.
I'm immediately thinking of some great applications. So those who are more fragile, bedridden, or the elderly, who it would not be advisable for them to go and start lifting 20-pound weights. Like
Hmm.
that's too much. A 2-pound weight's fine, but a 20-pound weight would be just way, way too much stress on them. Um, but lifting 2 weights, at a time is going to do hardly anything for them. And so what
Yeah.
you're saying is with these bands, they could sit on the couch or lay in bed. They put these bands around their arms and then
Yeah.
start lifting the 2 pounds. And what does that do? Like, does that make lifting 2 pounds to the body like it's lifting 20 pounds so that it
Hmm.
stimulates the body to, because it's sort of like tricking the body that we're lifting more weight than we actually are. Can you maybe walk us through the physiological process that happens?
Yep, exactly. So you traditionally wear the cuffs at the upper legs or upper arms, no matter what. So whether you're training biceps, quads, glutes, calves, you're always going to wear the position. Anything lower body, upper legs. Anything upper body, upper arms. And so the way it has several different mechanisms, and I think that there's even more mechanisms than what's kind of been published in the research because I don't think all of them have been fully understood, especially as we talked previously, kind of about the neurological aspects and kind of the nervous system view of things. I haven't seen a whole lot of research on how it impacts your neurology, which impacts the body. But the three main mechanisms that have been well researched are cellular swelling. So, when you're doing weight training, when you're doing heavy weight training specifically, you get swelling of the muscle cells, which triggers a cascade of positive benefits, such as, gaining muscle size, gaining strength, that sort of thing. The other mechanism would be mechanical tension. The tension of the band or the cuff itself is going to help increase strength. And then the last aspect would be the metabolic stress, just the metabolic stress that's happening from increasing things like lactate, kind of that burning sensation when you're doing this form of training, because you're doing high repetitions with low weight. That metabolic accumulation and that metabolic stress triggers a cascade of benefits, such as an increase in growth hormone or IGF-1, but basically all these muscle building and fat burning hormones are increased as a result of basically putting these on and training with lightweight. So yeah, to your point, what it's essentially doing at kind of the 10,000 foot view is it's tricking the brain in a way and tricking the body into thinking that you're training with heavy weight even though you're lifting with lightweight. And just from an energy standpoint alone, when you're doing regular weight training, moderate to heavy weight training, you're using your slow twitch fibers first, and after the energy system has been used up for those, then you transition into the fast twitch type 2 fibers. And those are the ones that have the greatest propensity for muscle growth and size growth if you want to be bigger and stronger. And with BFR training, by virtue of slowing the venous blood return and not the arterial inflow, it's an important distinction to make, is that you're not slowing the blood flow from the arteries into the limbs. You're just using these bands to tighten them to what feels like 70% pressure. You're tightening them so that way you're slowing the blood flow from leaving the limbs. This is called venous blood return. And so by doing that, you're essentially reducing that energy supply to those slow twitch fibers. So when I start lifting with, let's say 2 pound dumbbells or 5 pound dumbbells, whatever it may be, then if I didn't have the bands on, it would take many repetitions. It would take probably 10 minutes for me to really exhaust the energy supply from my slow twitch fibers. But with BFR training, it really becomes more like 10 seconds or 30 seconds. So now I've drastically reduced that energy supply quickly, which kicks in those fast twitch fibers, which is kind of a, like we said, biohack in a way to help get those type 2 fibers, those fast twitch fibers, to get fatigued and have some damage so they can grow back faster without ever having to lift any heavy weight.
Which fibers burn muscle? Or sorry, burn fat? Which, because I think about muscle building, like going and doing, because I know cardiovascular is great for burning fat, but also pumping iron is good for burning fat. Which process is that? The type 2 fast twitch, is that the one that burns fat?
Well, both are going to be burning, helping you burn energy. So if we talk about, burning more fat and losing weight, whether you're doing traditional training or BFR training, you're going to see, aspects of energy consumption in both. So weight training in general is going to be good if your goal is weight loss or fat loss, especially if you want to lose weight and keep it off. But with BFR training, it's not so much about which muscle fiber type that it recruits, because it's recruiting both, and it is recruiting type 2 fibers sooner. The main aspects for fat loss has more to do with the hormone influence on IGF-1 and growth hormone, as well as just the metabolic accumulation and the metabolic stress. So by increasing kind of these metabolites and saturating the muscles with these kind of nutrient-rich organic compounds, you're creating kind of the perfect storm in the right metabolic environment to help increase fat burning. And almost kind of like if somebody does kind of a high intensity interval training workout, a lot of people talk about HIIT training nowadays for fat loss as being more efficient. It's similar, I would say, for fat loss as doing HIIT training. So I always tell people there's no silver bullet, there's no panacea to, size, strength, or even fat loss. You're always going to have to take an integrated approach, and you're always going to have to take what's called a periodized approach, which means you're going to have to change things, every so often. You can't just do BFR training. You can't sit on the couch and put the bands on and flex and then, magically look like prime. Those unrealistic expectations. But what it will do is it'll, if you're a beginner, it will help you, make the right habits to, start working out and gain muscle a little bit easier and quicker, in my opinion. And if you're someone who's more advanced, it'll help you break through plateaus in areas that you may have been stuck. Maybe you can't get your arms to grow, your chest to grow, whatever it may be. Maybe you're having a hard time getting toned in certain areas. It'll help you kind of break through those certain plateaus. And it's also such a great bolt on. I personally like it as a finisher to a workout. It's a great way to finish a workout to really, like you said, to increase fat burning, because it is kind of like a HIIT routine or a high intensity routine. It does have metabolically kind of similar aspects. Or also as a deloading period. A lot of people, today are so focused on high intensity and training harder and doing more. Nobody ever talks about things like we talked about earlier about recovery. What about heat? Doing hot sauna therapy or cryotherapy or BFR training for a week. You have to have planned recovery if you want to see continual progress. And so I like it for all those aspects.
Very cool. So if someone were to buy your bands and start using them, would they wear them the entire time they're in the gym? Or do they just put them on for like 2 minutes or 5 minutes while they're working their arms?
Yeah, so essentially if you're training upper body, typically 10 to 15 minutes in total workout duration is sufficient. You don't really want to go over that when you're doing BFR training. For the lower body, it could be a little bit longer, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And there's a few ways you can use it. So you could use it in the beginning of the workout as a warm up. So maybe you're going to get into maybe a heavier routine that way, and you can use this as a faster way to warm up and a more effective way, because now you're also kind of activating neurons in the brain, and these pathways are going to help you activate those muscle fibers that you want to activate to improve strength and size. So as a warm up, it could be used for 5 to 10 minutes. It could be used, like I talked about, as almost a cool down or finisher to finish the workout. Although it's not much of a cool down, because it is pretty high intensity in terms of how it feels from the burning sensation. And another way you could use it as a standalone. So let's say you're trying to recover from an injury, or maybe your nervous system, your brain is a little bit burnt out on heavy training. You could use it as a standalone workout, and you could do that. You could alternate it during the week. So maybe 3 days a week you go heavy, 3 days a week you do BFR. You could do it throughout the month. Sometimes I'll do what's called undulating periodization, undulating meaning wave form. And what that means is that weeks 1 through 3 every month, you do heavyweight training and you try to go heavier every week. But week 4 of the month, you take a week off and you do active recovery with BFR. So that way you're still maintaining or making more progress while still using lightweight and not touching any heavyweight that week. So there are very, very many ways you can use it. Another way is to doing walk studies on BFR training, where they would simply wear the bands on their upper legs while walking. And there was one study in particular that was really interesting. They used our bands in the study, and what they did is they had these different men who were they were actually all very, very fit individuals. Many of them had military backgrounds, so these guys were not general beginners to exercise. They were advanced. Their bodies had a lot of adaptation to hard, heavy training. And all they had these guys do was, for 3 days a week for 6 weeks, they walked for 20 minutes wearing these bands, wearing our bands around their legs. And at the end of the study, they all saw across the board, they saw significant improvements in 1.5 mile run time. So they got faster, they improved their VO2 max, they improved their leg strength and leg size. So they saw gains across the board just by simply walking. So I think cardio with BFR can be extremely valuable to allow you to make progress while also letting the mind relax, letting the mind unwind, because it's kind of hard to go from heavy, hard weight training and then also go for a hard run or do, sprinting. It's hard to do that all the time because it's not only taxing on the body, but it's really taxing on the brain.
Very interesting. I have a friend who recently, he's a runner, and he recently had to put a cast on his leg because of fractures, because of the running. He runs so much that he loves running. It's his life. But the impact of the running, the long distance running, has caused fractures in his heel or somewhere near his foot. And so he's wearing a cast to recover. Could someone who's maybe, twisted their ankle or bro- broken their wrist or something, wear these while doing a light movement? Could they wear it like in a pool, or just wear it just like you said, someone sitting on the couch flexing or moving their leg? And would that help them to maintain their muscle and maintain their optimal the optimal functioning of their muscle while they're unable to work out?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously, if somebody is kind of near their post-surgery or they're recovering from a serious injury, they'd want to obviously check with their physician first to make sure that this is the right thing to incorporate at that time. But for somebody who's trying to, strengthen an area that's weak and can't do a whole lot of load, if they can't handle a whole lot of load like they would from running or from heavy weight training, then this would be a great tool. And like you said, yeah, you could do it with swimming, you could do it with simply walking, you could do it with something low impact like elliptical or bike. So there's many different ways you could use it, but the idea is always kind of the same. You want to try to maximize the volume. You want to train to what's called volitional fatigue, which is kind of a fancy way of just saying muscle failure. You're trying to train to failure. And so you want to try to train to where you can't do any more good reps, for example, and you want to try to keep the rest periods short, and you want to have a lot of time under tension. So the whole idea is to keep kind of the workouts very efficient. You don't want it to be an hour. You want it to be like we talked about before, 5 to 20 minutes, and you want to be trying to do as many reps as you can with a very very light amount of weight. Usually around, I recommend 20% of whatever you can do for one repetition maximally, or whatever feels, I guess, like 20% of your maximum. That's typically where you want to be in terms of load and resistance.
When you say 20%, do you mean like if someone normally uh lifts 20 pounds, you want them to do only 20% of that?
No, we're talking about 20% of your one repetition maximum. So if somebody normally lifts 20 pounds, that 20 pounds is probably 75% of their one rep max, because, when you're doing like sets of 10 reps, which most people do at the gym, the standard thing that people do is like 3 sets of 10 reps at the gym, then that weight they're using is somewhere between 50 to 75% of their one rep max, most likely. That's usually the case. So if their one rep max, let's say, if we're talking about dumbbell curls, if their one rep max is, maybe they can do 50-pound dumbbells for one rep, then they'd want to use 20% of that. So they'd want to use
Oh,
maybe 10 pounds. And that
got
number
it.
can fluctuate. So I said 20%, but there's studies that go even higher, maybe 30 or 40%. But I generally recommend starting on the low end and being a little more conservative with the load to make sure you're doing it correctly, you're training with good form. Because the thing that's a little bit difficult with heavy weight training, which is why BFR training can be preferable, is with any kind of heavy weight training or even moderate weight training, you can really compromise form very easily. The form will start to go as you increase load, because it's very easy to make it hard for the muscles to be able to contract properly, and it's very easy to fatigue quickly when you're using heavier loads. So it's preferable to start lighter, around 20% or less in many instances, and make sure you have the technique down and you're maintaining the technique always before you decide to increase load. And in many cases, I tell people before they increase the load with BFR training, just try increasing the sets and reps. If you can do 30 reps with 5-pound dumbbells, try 40 or 50 reps and more sets before you necessarily increase their weight.
You just broke up there. So you said try doing 40 or 50 uh reps
Correct.
within a set?
Yeah. So, with BFR training, this kind of the typical protocol is doing somewhere between 15 to 30 reps and doing somewhere between 3 to 4 sets. So I might do, let's say if we're talking about bicep curls, I might do a set of 30 and then I might rest for 10 to 20 seconds and then do another set of, 30 reps or less and then rest for, 10 to 20 seconds and do it again, for 3 to 4 sets total. And so instead of increasing the weight, if that becomes too easy, then I usually recommend try doing 5 sets, do 5 rounds instead of 4 rounds, or do 40 reps instead of 30 reps each set. Try to increase the amount of reps it takes to fatigue. So that can usually vary from person to person. Someone who's a little more advanced with their training, they're going to have to probably do 30 to 50 reps per set, and they might have to do 4 sets all the way upwards of 10 sets for it to really be effective for them.
Now, I know everyone's a little different because I mean, there's so many variables when it comes to building muscle. Some men, they just like go for a walk and all of a sudden they look like buff, right? And then there's other other ones of us who spend years in the gym and to gain 1 pound of muscle mass. And so I know there's so many variables, but to this question, what how sooner do people see results? Or if someone were to just do standard weightlifting versus using the BFR training, is it 30% more effective, or can we see that we're building muscle like 25% more or faster, or do you have a handle on the sort of across the board amount of efficiency that there is for building muscle using this?
There's nothing really across the board because they've been used in studies, different studies with different populations, and what you're referring to, you're talking about some people have an easier time gaining muscle, some people have a harder time. That has a lot to do with, circumstances such as their genetics or hormonal factors. Like men typically with more testosterone are going to have an easier time building muscle than maybe a woman who doesn't have that kind of testosterone, and nutrition is going to play a role. So there's a lot of these external factors that are going to play a role in your progress. But from a standpoint of a lot of the research across the board has really shown that doing lightweight BFR training has been equally as effective, and in some cases more effective than doing traditional weight training with moderate to heavy weight without the bands. And so I think that's the important thing to understand for many people is that if they're maybe a little bit averse to weightlifting because, they maybe never really made it a habit, or they're afraid of getting injured, or they just don't really like lifting moderate to heavy weight, then this is a really easy way to add weight training to your program without having to do heavy weight training. Or if you're somebody who's maybe burnt out on doing heavy weight training all the time, this is a great thing to incorporate and use. Or if it's somebody who just wants to break through plateaus, it's a great thing to incorporate, at least at the end of your workouts.
Now, does this only affect the muscles of the arm and the legs, or because of the chemicals in the body that are stimulated, like the growth hormone, does it actually stimulate all muscles in the body to grow?
Yeah, no, it's exactly that. That's a big misconception. Is many people think that because of where the bands are placed, that the only benefit is to the muscles directly near the site of occlusion, but it's actually creating a systemic effect. So because of the fact that you're getting this change in, this metabolic change from the metabolic stress you're creating, and because of the fact that you're accumulating all these metabolites, you're creating a shift in homeostasis, similar to like what we talked about with cryotherapy or with heat therapy. You're creating a hormetic shift in the body, and that's going to have an effect on the muscles that are even more distal to the site of occlusion, such as the pecs, the back, the calves. Some people think that they need to move the bands to the elbows or to the knees when they're doing forearms or calves, and it's not true because of exactly what I just said. You don't need to move the bands, and it's not advised to do that for that reason. So yeah, to answer your question, you can be training, you could be doing chest day and increasing your pec size and bench press strength when wearing these on your upper arms. And there's actually a famous study, I think a few studies now, on bench press with BFR, and they found that by using the bands while doing light weight with BFR on bench press, they were able to increase not only the bench press strength but also pec size. So very counter to what a lot of people may think about BFR. A lot of people still think that, oh, I'm just going to be able to use this for my biceps and triceps, but it's really not. It's you could use it for any muscle group.
And that's really cool because you obviously want to build muscle on the whole body, not just not just be top heavy and because that's out of balance. I did that as a figure skater. I overworked certain muscles in my leg, which pulled my knees out of whack, and then I had a lot of knee pain. I had to stop figure skating and go to physical therapy, and they had me do exercises to strengthen the muscles on the other part of my leg that pulled the knee back into place. And it just made me really aware that a repetition in one area and strengthening, even one leg muscle pulls the other leg muscle out if you don't do something holistically. So you're saying these bands don't throw someone out of balance. They help the whole body to become stronger and put on more muscle.
Exactly. Yeah. It all depends, of course, how you're training. If you're doing arms every day, then you're probably going to be out of balance. You're going to have huge arms.
Right?
But if you're doing a balanced training program in terms of the muscle groups you're working, this can be a very effective tool to create. It can create, when we go back and we talk about kind of the neurological approach, one of my opinions about BFR that none of the research studies have really looked at is how it's improving your brain's map of how to contract muscle fibers. So just how your brain has a map of how to move, and has your brain has a map of kind of your spatial awareness.
Mm-hmm.
But your brain also has a contractile map. So it has a map of how to contract muscle fibers. And for many people, this map can be blurry. And this is why, certain exercises they get injured on, or certain exercises they're exceptionally weak on. Maybe posterior chain exercises like, rear delts or lat exercises, or squats, whatever it may be. Certain exercises, either during that whole range or sometimes during a certain portion of the range of motion, most of us tend to be weak in a certain range, and that's because that contractile map is a little bit blurry. The brain has either forgotten how to contract the muscle fibers properly. Maybe that's from poor form. Maybe that's from sitting too much all day long and not getting enough good movement. There could be a number of it could be injury, it could be a number of reasons as to why, you might have a blurred contractile map. And so one of my theories is that BFR is improving that because it's, activating different types of receptors. We have different receptors in the tissue. We have mechanoreceptors that sense changes in stretch. We have, chemoreceptors that sense chemical changes in the tissue. We have thermoreceptors that, sense different changes in temperature, and baroreceptors that sense changes in pressure. So all these receptor types, when we activate them and stimulate them, we're firing neurons in the brain, which if you're firing them in a certain pattern or in a certain way, you could be theoretically improving that brain's map. And so I think that's what it's doing, because you're getting kind of this compounding effect of, you're getting mechanical tension, you're getting that metabolic stress, you're activating all these different types of receptor types that I think you're also, depending on how you're training, obviously, you could be improving that map. So if I was somebody who, let's say, had really small rear delts, and I always had a lot of shoulder pain, especially like maybe in the front of the shoulder from years of heavy bench press, whatever it may be, then, one thing they could try is just taking a band, like a, elastic band, putting the BFR bands on, and just doing some small rear delt circles. So really focusing on that posterior delt end range of motion, that end contraction, and just focusing on that specific range of motion that they're weakest, and doing a lot of repetitions with it while they're wearing the bands. And that can help kind of restore their proper contractile capabilities, proper strength, and balance of strength. So that way, when they're doing their shoulder press or bench press or any pressing movements, they're properly contracting and using the muscles around the shoulder, and not just one side of the body, like the front of the body.
Very interesting. I love that idea that we can work with the neuroscience to kind of break through those barriers that have taken place. That old muscle memory. A lot of us sit too much, and also we sometimes have holding patterns because of old injuries, right? And then I guess we're sort of afraid. I know my husband really seriously injured his foot, um, and he was in the gym and he re-injured it, and now he doesn't want to go back to the gym because it's he'd rather do something else like walk or something, but he's afraid of repeating the same injury. And sometimes we're afraid of using a whole muscle group or using a whole doing a whole motion because of a past um a past injury, and we may not even realize, like, it just might be sort of unconscious that we're holding or avoiding. And is there something about PLR that stimulates the brain to rewrite that map, or is it simply because it's so safe to use that we can consciously go, okay, I know it's safe, I'm going to use a lighter weight, we're going to start to get results in that area, which overwrites that map.
I think there's different reasons most likely why it's happening. I think part of it is because yes, it makes you feel safe, so that you're actually going to go through that range of motion where you might be weak, or maybe the range of motion where you might normally have pain. You're normally
Mm.
not going to enter that range with heavier weight, just in fear of hurting yourself.
Mhm.
So there is a psychological aspect of it, of reducing those fears. You're going to improve your movement. You're going to improve your mobility. Anyone who's thrown out their back or injured themselves knows what I'm talking about. They know that they're going to break their back. And that just comes from a general misunderstanding of how pain works, and what pain really is, which is just an output by the brain to prevent you from moving. It's not that anything's actually probably broken, but in many cases, yeah, I think that it's going to help you feel safer and reduce the neural threat so that you'll move more. But also, I think, again, I think what it's doing is it's helping you fire up different receptor types, which essentially, when you fire up the receptors in the body, you're sending signals to the corresponding areas of the brain. There's this idea called the homunculus, which is, if you look it up, the homunculus is a physical representation of how many nerve endings are dedicated to different body parts. And if you look at this homunculus on like Google Images, it looks like a little troll. It's a funny looking little creature.
I've seen this. It's like the hands are big and
Yep, yeah,
the
tongue,
lips are
lips.
big, and yeah, the feet are big. And yeah, you're right, because we have a lot of receptors in our hands, but we don't have a lot of receptors by our thigh or
Exactly.
our ribs or by our belly button. Yeah.
Yeah, in the thigh, the ratio of nerves to nerve fibers to muscle fibers might be 1 to 1,500 or 1 to 3,000, whereas in something like the eyeball, it might be 1 to 1 because it needs to be that precise.
Wow.
So yeah, so there's the homunculus is kind of that visual representation of how much space those important areas of the body really take up, because those are important to our survival. And with BFR, I think what's happening is that you're firing up all these different receptors in the tissue, which is getting a neuronal change in the brain. There's this idea called the central integrative state of the neuronal pool, and basically what it means is, like, when you're firing up different neurons at the same time, especially in the same area of the body, then you're getting kind of this compounding, this aggregate effect that in a way makes the brain pay more attention to create neuroplastic change. It's hard to create any kind of lasting neuroplastic change if you're doing something passively. And that's why I'm not a big fan of passive things like, having someone stretch you out, or, even chiropractic sometimes to a certain extent. These are all passive modalities that you're not actively participating. You're not doing anything. You're just laying there being stretched, or laying there, on a foam roller. And if you're not doing it actively, then there's not enough load for your brain to learn and make change. So there has to be
Mm.
some, there has to be a certain amount, in neuroscience, I think they call it salience. So there has to be a certain amount of salience, which basically just means there has to be enough for your brain to want to pay attention. So in some cases, for especially for someone who's an athlete, they need more load. So in some cases, lifting heavier weights or doing a movement under load can make neuroplastic change. And that can be a good thing sometimes, and sometimes it can be a bad thing. It can be maladaptive. If I'm training under heavy load with bad technique, then I'm going to train my brain to continue to repeat that bad technique. So I'm
Mhm.
ingraining that bad technique and those bad patterns with that heavy load. And so BFR in a way is presenting a load to the brain. Even though you're not lifting heavy weight, you're creating a load because you're firing up so many different receptor types. You're creating a load in terms of the amount of stimuli. So you're getting a chemical change, you're getting a physical change, You're getting a contractile change. You're getting all these different changes that the sum of them is presenting a load where the brain says, "Oh, I need to pay attention to this. This is important." And now your brain's like, "Okay, I can now, I can now start remapping this area that I wasn't really, able to understand how to move before, or I didn't realize how I can contract these fibers." And so if you look at, in the neuroscience world, if you look at, something that really fascinates me, which is phantom limb pain. These are
Mm-hmm.
people who don't even have a limb. Maybe they lost an appendage, in war or in the military. They lose an arm. They come back to the doctor and they say, "I have pain in my right arm." And most doctors are baffled because they say, "Well, you don't have a right arm. That's impossible. How can you have pain in your right hand, which you don't have?" And that's because every human, essentially, from a neuroscience perspective, it's believed that every human is born with a map of the body. So you're born with a physical somatotopic map, which has to do with sensation. So this is what we call the sensory cortex. It's a strip of the brain that has all these nerve endings. Again, we're talking about the homunculus, the physical representation. There's a map of sensation that's dedicated in the brain. So even when you lose an arm, that map hasn't necessarily been kind of reapportioned. It hasn't been changed. So the brain is confused. And because of that confusion, there could be this output response in the form of pain, which is creating kind of this delusion that you have pain in an area that doesn't exist. Because when we talk about making change and neuroplasticity, we have to understand that the end goal is to always think about how does this influence the brain. And we don't, again, we don't see that, really being the goal in traditional, exercise science. We don't see many of the major organizations teaching that. We don't see many of the major, medical establishments that are training our doctors. They're not teaching this. They're talking about a very siloed biomechanical approach. But again, the brain is the CEO of the body. So if I want to make a change with my movement, with my strength, with my speed, with my performance, I have to be looking about, where is the deficiency in the brain? Maybe my deficiency is proprioceptive, like we talked about. Proprioceptive meaning movement. Maybe I need to improve how I contract certain muscle fibers in a certain range of motion. Maybe it's visual. I need to improve my, visual skills like gaze stabilization, or switching your gaze from one object to another, or peripheral vision, or convergence. Maybe it's your vestibular system, your brain's equilibrium. So, to improve your balance. You have to look at all these different aspects to see where's the deficiency and then train that so that you can improve and have a stickier result. Because again, going back to my earlier experience as a personal trainer, if you just only take a biomechanical approach, you're going to burn out your options very quickly. You're going to try a few movements. You're going to realize, like someone who has shoulder pain, for example, a typical exercise I see prescribed to them is to put a towel under the elbow and go and do these rotator cuff exercises. And for most people, it does nothing. And in many cases, makes them feel worse and increases the pain. But no therapist is saying, "Oh, well, let's look at your eyes. Let's look at, do you have any scars on the body that could be affecting your map, which could
Mm.
be aggravating this pain?" And so there's no kind of holistic approach or holistic view that's looking at all these components and testing all of them to try to find out what's the root cause. Is it the eyes? Is it the inner ear? Is it the body? Is it something else? Sometimes it is movement, and you just have to train it through exercise or use implements like BFR. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's more neurological and has to do with something a little bit higher.
How would we figure out what our deal is? Do you see people? Do you take clients still, or do you have a resource that we could check out, or a book that we could check out to help us identify what issue we have and how we can best support our body to correct it?
Yeah, so I don't personally take clients, but one thing I would recommend to anybody, if they're, especially if for somebody who's stuck with things like pain, or they've been told that they have limited options to improve, then I would suggest seeing a functional neurologist. That would be probably the best approach. And there's I'm sure some in almost every city. And a functional neurologist is going to do kind of what a neurologist does, which is this neuro type of flow where they're going to look at the whole body. They're going to take a holistic approach. They're going to look at everything, your movement, your eyes, your balance, as well as other things like maybe taking certain blood tests and analyzing some of the functional data too. So that would be the best approach if depending on what you're trying to solve. If you have something like, usually I recommend that for people who are dealing with some kind of pain or some kind of insomnia or some kind of health issue that just they could never solve or figure it out. If it's somebody who's trying to improve their strength or mobility, I'd highly recommend looking for somebody who's, maybe been educated by a company called Z Health Performance. They're an organization out in Arizona that's they're one of the very few that actually teaches neuroscience to trainers.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike many of the mainstream, organizations and certifications out there, they take more of a holistic approach because again,
Mm-hmm.
that they're looking at things from kind of a functional neurology point of view and teaching it to, they're teaching it actually to doctors as well as trainers, massage therapists, all kinds of professionals, not just trainers. And so I would recommend looking for a Z Health, certified personal trainer. I'm sure they have I think they have a map on their website where you can search for, trainers in your area. So if you're looking for a personal trainer, that would be the best source to find somebody. And I'm pretty sure their rates are going to be similar to a regular personal trainer for the most part. So instead of hiring, the guy at the gym who looks good, which is typically what most people do, they go to the gym and they want to hire the guy that looks the best. In my experience, the guy who often looks the best is usually the worst trainer because he's
Really?
often, yeah, oh, he's usually the worst because he became a trainer because it's cool, not because he's passionate. He wanted to be the cool guy in the gym, and oftentimes they're using all kinds of other, substances.
Ooh.
They're doing all kinds of extreme types of diets that works for their genetics and works for them. So they're usually an unusual kind of genetic case where they look really good because of other factors that are not going to work for everybody.
Mm.
And that's not always the case. There's cases where I've been wrong about that. And there's people who look really good and they're the best looking trainer in the gym, biggest guy in the gym, and they end up being one of the best trainers I've seen. But that's extremely rare. Often what I find is, the trainer who doesn't look the best is the one who's most devoted to their own clients. Kind of a catch 22. They don't spend enough time on their own health, which they probably should, and they're so dedicated to their clients. They're so dedicated to learning. They're such kind of a science geek that they can get the best results and they have the best education and the most passion, and that's what you want from any kind of practitioner, whether it be a trainer or healthcare provider. You want someone who's going to really take the time to care, to ask enough questions, to take enough history, to keep trying different things. Not someone who's going to be lazy, try a few options and then just kind of give up, or just cheat and just use simple methods that are not really going to get results, but make you think you're getting results, so you keep paying them, and nobody wants that.
Absolutely. So how to choose the right trainer for you, find someone who isn't necessarily the most buff guy there, but the one who has the most certifications and is really into the science.
Yeah, certifications can play a role into it. A lot of it is if you go to the gym regularly, you can kind of spot someone who's really, more of a professional versus someone who's not. And the easy way to spot this is, are they holding some kind of a workout program? Uh, Even today, when I go to the gym, I see almost no trainers holding a clipboard with a workout program. So that tells me immediately you're making it up as you go. How good of a professional can you be? What kind of results can you actually get if you're just making it up as you go? And don't tell me, oh, I remember, it's in my head. I always hear that. I remember trainers who I would question on that. The trainers that used to work for me, they'd say, oh, it's in my head. I don't believe that. There's no way. If you have dozens of clients, even 5 clients, if you only have 5 clients, you still wouldn't be able to remember what they did last time and what they're doing today. There's no way. And so, just simply by looking at what do they have with them, how are they conducting the workout, how are they facilitating the workout, are they engaged? Do they have their arms crossed and they're kind of looking off in the distance, or are they actually constantly kind of cueing the client, cueing their form, cueing their technique? Are they really involved throughout the whole workout? Are they texting? Things like that. Those are the things I look at to kind of qualify a professional and say, okay, this person's really, they have all the things to be great, and they most likely will help get the best results if they can execute those things. The education is important, but someone who has the passion can always learn. You can always send them to Z Health or one of these organizations to get the education if they have the passion and the willingness to learn. But somebody who's just wants to be a trainer just because it's cool and they just want to look cool and they're not really into it and they're just like texting their friends while they're training, which is probably what's happening in 99% of the gyms right now, then that person's not going to get you results. They're going to waste your time. They're going to waste your money. So you got to find somebody who's really into it as a career, as a profession.
Love it. That is absolute gold. Thank you. I love that you brought up Z Health. I actually have a friend who was in a wheelchair after a brain injury, and it was Z Health that she used those techniques to recover her ability to walk again. And then she went
Wow.
on to take the trainings. Yeah, but it was because of Z Health, and so that's I learned about it through her. And then I had a friend who had some vertigo, and we got her, and she was a Pilates instructor, and we got her the DVDs, just the basic, following, the very basic Z Health DVDs, and a few of those sessions completely corrected her vertigo. I mean, it was just so
Hmm.
cool to see um, how interesting it is, the Z Health, because they're using the retraining the proprioception at every single joint in the body, sort of retraining the brain map. And I totally agree with you. If you're going to work with a personal trainer, you want them to have that kind of understanding. It's not just about go leave a bunch of sweat at the gym. I mean, it's just not, it's not about blood, sweat, and tears anymore. It's about being efficient.
Hmm.
And I just love this idea of the BFR. When I first saw your BFR, I have to tell you, I was one of those people that went, "This doesn't sound very healthy."
Hmm.
Cut,
Oh yeah, I did the same
reducing
thing.
blood
Mhm.
flow out of the muscle group. That doesn't, it seems counterintuitive, because I've interviewed a doctor that says that lactic acid is the root of most diseases, that a buildup or the body's inability to metabolize lactic acid can cascade and trigger so many diseases, and that by supporting the body's ability to remove lactic acid is what's going to bring people back to health. And so this idea of sort of intentionally having it build up in a muscle group does seem counterintuitive. Are there any risks? Are there any side effects? Once you remove the band, all of a sudden you're releasing all this lactic acid that's built up in the muscle back into the body. Are there any risks, or should we be concerned about something?
No, so that's a common question I get too. Is it unsafe? Is this going to be, a risk factor for clotting or anything like that? And what they found is that, so with clotting, for example, BFR, would logically be concerned for clotting because you're, restricting blood flow and pooling blood flow. But in reality, what's happening is, when you look at the balance between coagulation, which is the clotting, and the fibrinolytic activity, you actually don't see, any increase in coagulation with BFR training. So from a clotting standpoint and a risk for things like thrombosis or deep vein thrombosis, there's no added risk with BFR training. And actually, in most studies, what they found is that BFR training, from a safety perspective, I think it was one Scandinavian study in particular that looked at the safety aspects, and they said that BFR training was as safe, if not safer, than traditional training. And I believe that because with traditional training, you're more likely to injure yourself. You're more likely, when you're lifting heavier weight, you're more likely to lift with poor form and injure yourself than you are by applying a little bit of compression to your upper arms and lifting with very, very lightweight or body weight. So even though, yes, you are accumulating some lactate because you're training to fatigue and producing fatigue, you're not doing enough, and your body won't really let you do enough because you're going to fatigue so quickly when you're doing this to create, that kind of damage. If you're doing something like CrossFit, for example, not really a big proponent of CrossFit in many cases because they're not using things like BFR bands. They're using traditional training. In many cases, they're using heavyweight training like Olympic lifting, and combining it with high intensity, high reps. So it's like, imagine taking kind of this concept of, high rep, high volume training from BFR and now applying it with traditional heavy lifting. That's a recipe for disaster. That's how you get, severe muscle damage and things like they talk about rhabdomyolysis, which is kind of this breakdown of the muscle cell where it leaks all this toxicity into the body, and it can make you really sick and in some cases kill you if you're training that hard. But with BFR training, it's really kind of the opposite because you're not getting that type of central nervous system load like you do with high intensity or heavyweight training. It's actually more, I would say, more parasympathetic in that way, rest and rather than fight or flight. And and it's also because, again, because you're lifting light weight, you're not putting the same type of physical and biomechanical stress on the body. So from that aspect, they found that from a safety standpoint, as long as you're a healthy individual, then it's safe. If you have health issues like diabetes or nerve types of neuropathy or nerve damage, then you'd obviously want to be working with a professional before you just jump into BFR training because it may not be appropriate for you. So there are some contraindications. Pregnancy would be another one. But these are kind of also your standard contraindications for any kind of weight training as well. I wouldn't tell someone, who's pregnant, 9 months pregnant, to jump into CrossFit and start doing, heavy weight training out of nowhere either. So these contraindications kind of, I would say, apply to many types of traditional training too. But yeah, for the normal healthy individual who wants to gain some strength and look better and feel better without having to, constantly go heavier every week all the time, then this is a great tool to implement.
Oh, absolutely. I love that you brought up the rest and digest, like stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system response, because although exercise can be a de-stressor, often it is a stressor. And so we have to keep that balance, like you said. Maybe incorporate some yoga classes in there, and if you're doing CrossFit, or doing some high intensity training, incorporate something that's relaxing, going for walks, and that you can use the BFR on those weeks that you decide to walk instead, knowing full well that you're stimulate the body to continue to build muscle, but knowing that it's good to stimulate that rest and digest response, bring the stress down, that's really important. Uh, is it sustainable, the muscle that we build? Because like some people might go, well, it sounds like it's fake muscle. We're tricking the body into building it. Is it sustainable muscle? If I were to use the BFR for like, let's say 6 months, and then I continue on a regular routine of being physically active, but stop using the bands, would that muscle go away?
As long as you're still active and you're still, if you're still doing some movements and training that's still specific to the results you want to keep, then you shouldn't lose those results. If you go from, let's say, doing, BFR training for your arms and your goal is to grow the size of your arms, and then after 12 weeks you stop doing BFR training and you just are only doing running, your arms are going to shrink. You can't just go from that to doing nothing specific to that goal. But if, let's say, you transition away from BFR and you transition into, a different modality, you're still training arms, relatively hard or with some decent amount of effort, but with maybe moderate weight without the bands or with heavy weight without the bands, then you're not going to lose your results. If anything, you're going to continue to see progress because, you're following a proper progression and periodization. So you shouldn't lose your results. It's not like steroids or anything like that. It's not going to influence you're not going to see any kind of hormonal change that's going to influence your hormones in a way that is going to be similar to results from steroids. It's not like a magic pill like we talked about, but it will help you break through many of those plateaus if you've been stuck.
Excellent. And what if someone always used it? I mean, is it something that we should use on and off so that we don't plateau, or is it okay to use with every workout for like the 15 or 20 minutes, like you said?
Yeah, you can use it in that way at every workout. I generally recommend 2 to 3 days. Studies that 2 to 3 days a week is kind of the sweet spot for frequency for BFR training.
Okay, great. You just broke up there. So you're saying 2 to 3 times a week is the sweet spot?
Yeah, 2 to 3 days a week is the sweet spot for frequency of BFR training.
Got it. Now, you've mentioned nutrition. What's your preferred diet or nutrients to support the body in building healthy muscle?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the basics. I'm not really a fan of, all kinds of a wide variety of the supplements that are out there that haven't been studied or researched enough. There's always something new, when it comes to weight loss and muscle gain. There's always some kind of new magic ingredient that's going to promise the world. But, those things, maybe they work for some people, maybe they don't. But I feel like the tried and true always works, which is, getting enough protein intake. So if you're not getting it from food, then you might need to supplement and get it from an additional protein source like whey protein isolate, for example. Um, there are other plant proteins that you could use as well if you're vegetarian or vegan, but just getting enough protein on a basic level is necessary for muscle gain. If you're not eating any protein, you're not going to build muscle. If you're only eating, carbs and you don't eat any proteins and fats, you're going to have a hard time building and maintaining muscle mass in the long run. So, getting adequate protein intake is important. You have to also think about things like creatine. Creatine's a very, very simple, tried and true supplement that's been proven to help you gain size and strength. And there's different forms of creatine that are out there that, can work, better for some people than others in terms of the side effects of, the only side effects that are already out there for creatine is really kind of the bloating and maybe the stomach discomfort. No major side effects, but there are different forms out there that might work better than others, than just using standard creatine monohydrate for some people. But whey protein, creatine, I like some essential fatty acids, things like, fish oil. That can be beneficial for many people, especially if you're not getting enough omega-3s in your diet. A fish oil supplement can be useful because fatty acids are really important to, your hormone production, making sure that you're getting enough of the proper hormones, and making sure in general you're eating enough fats, especially saturated fats. A lot of people want to avoid things like egg yolks and eating fatty cuts of meat, but you need that cholesterol and those saturated fats to have, proper hormone balance, especially for building muscle. So yeah, outside of whey protein, fish oil, and creatine, it's not a whole lot of things that I recommend to the general public. For someone, if we're talking about specificity, if somebody's more of an endurance athlete, I might recommend, electrolytes. I like this company called Trace Minerals Research. They have some really good products, like their Constant Trace supplement has, I think 80 plus trace minerals in it, similar to what you'd see in like Himalayan sea salt or Celtic sea salt. That really helps replace a lot of what's lost during high intensity exercise. So if you're an athlete, or maybe you do, jujitsu, or maybe you do running or whatever it may be, and you're losing a lot of fluids through hard training, or certain types of climates, if you're in a hotter climate and you're training hard, you need to replace those minerals in order to have proper muscle contraction and proper recovery. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to see growth and have strength. You're going to feel really weak in the gym. Magnesium can be another one that's really beneficial, especially as it pertains to sleep. I like using magnesium at night before bed can be really good to help improve relaxation, while at the same time also kind of restoring the brain and restoring the body so you can recover faster and recover better. So those I like in general. I also like, a B complex or a B12 supplement. I think that's constantly for many people, that tends to be very depleted, being depleted in B vitamins. So, and there's a variety of forms that you can use. Typically, a liposomal B12 will be, best absorbed for most people outside of taking injections, which I'm not really a big fan of that, but, to each their own. But liposomal B12 or B complex could be useful for, proper digestion and, again, proper, kind of nerve conductivity for the brain to fire the neurons. For a kind of a whole wide variety of metabolic reactions, you need to have the right minerals and the right B vitamins. So those are kind of what I would consider to be the staples for the general public and/or, kind of the athlete, depending on what your goal is. Everything else is kind of, experimentation. If you find something that works for you and you don't have any side effects from it, and you're happy with the results, then that's great. But I'm always very cautious because there's always something that comes out that says, "Oh yeah, remember that supplement? There's a study that came out that showed that they all had liver damage." So, so I'm very
Mm.
careful about, what kinds of. I'm not really a big fan of most fat burners. People always talk about like, "Oh, what fat burners do you recommend?" And I'm like, "Well, the best fat burner is, eating better and sleeping better and exercising better. Getting the right kind of trifecta for your body is going to help you lose body fat and keep it at the level you want to keep it at, without having to take some kind of pill." And obviously, there's certain things, certain ingredients, certain supplements that might be able to make that a little bit better. But the simple things work the best, like caffeine. If I want a good pre-workout or a good fat burner, I might just have a cup of coffee before a workout.
Ha.
And that the antioxidants, the B vitamins, the caffeine content in coffee make it a really good fat burner and pre-workout. It's going to improve your fatty acid oxidation. It's going to improve your work capacity so you can work out harder, burn more calories. So, that's going to be your safest, tried and true fat burner, besides trying to trust, all kinds of other, ketones or Garcinia Cambogia or whatever it may be, whatever's the trend. So not to knock on any one thing, because certain things, again, like I said, if it works for you and you're happy with the results, then I'm all for it. But I like to stick with the basics, and I'm a big fan of just eating food. If you can eat real food and get the results you want by just eating food and not having to use a ton of supplements, I'm kind of a minimalist that way. Sometimes less is more.
I'd like to give you some like made up case studies, and then you tell us what kind of workout that person or that type of person would best benefit from. So let's start with the man or woman who's has very little muscle, or they feel like they're just really self-conscious about the amount of muscle they have, and they have a difficult time. Maybe it's because they're shy, or maybe because they've tried really hard, but they have a difficult time building muscle. Um, using the BFR, your BFR bands, your BFR training. What should they do in the gym or in life to sort of start the ball rolling and start seeing results?
Yeah, the best thing that they could do is, I would say, a combination of, traditional heavy training and BFR training. So, you might have an example routine might be that you're doing kind of your heavier leg workout on the front end of the workout, and towards the end of the workout, you're doing 2 to 3 exercises with very, very lightweight with the bands on the legs, and you're doing high volume, short rest periods. You're using that during your workouts if you want to gain size and strength quickly. That's going to be the most effective way for that person to see results quickly. That's what the research has shown, at least, that a combination of the two modalities is going to produce the best results. Because some people try to look at, okay, well, how does heavyweight training do by itself? How does BFR do by itself? And they found that doing both together is going to produce the best results. So from a training standpoint, that's what I would recommend. And then optimizing your sleep is going to be the most important. Like we talked about earlier, how can you improve your sleep environment, whether it be with an eye mask, blackout curtains, blue blocking glasses, blue filters. What you can do to improve, because sleep is half the equation. You have to get enough sleep and enough quality sleep in order to grow. Most of the growth hormone is released while we're sleeping, and most of the growth and rebuilding happens while we're sleeping. So you're not actually growing in the gym. When you're in the gym, you're breaking things down so that you can grow when you're asleep. And so most people nowadays are just so fight or flight, so go, 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 so sympathetic dominant that, they don't really think about sleep, and they really overlook it. And they try to just, when they're trying to get results, they try to muscle through their results. They try to muscle through it and push through things without taking a step back to think, okay, I need to maybe actually think about my recovery a little bit smarter. I need to
Mm,
maybe, I can't sleep at night because my mind is, can't rest because I'm too fight or flight. I'm thinking about work, and I'm amped up for my pre-workout powder. I worked out really hard. So there's all these factors that could be influencing why they can't sleep or can't sleep well. So you might need to start, like we talked about earlier, you might need to program in your recovery. You might maybe need to finish your workout or finish your day with a hot sauna session so you can actually unwind and relax and then get into a good deep sleep. You might maybe
I
need to
love
do
it.
Epsom salt bath and get some, more magnesium to help you sleep better. There's a variety of techniques you can use to improve your sleep hygiene and sleep quality, but that's definitely important. You can't stay up till 2 in the morning every night and then get up at 6 a.m. and hit the gym, for 3 hours and expect to see tremendous gains. It's just not going to happen unless you're using, I guess, a ton of steroids. Probably not going to see a lot of gains.
I have an entire episode I did with Dr. Megan Saunders on sleep hygiene. Listeners can go back. I don't remember the episode number. It was a while ago, so they can go to learntrail.com and type in sleep or sleep hygiene at learntrail.com to find that. And then I had the creator of Swanee's blue blocking glasses on, James Swanek, on the show, and he talked all about it. And I was like so skeptical. I'm like, yeah, right. And he sent me a pair of his glasses, and I put them on at 9, and I was asleep by 9:30. I couldn't
Hmm.
believe I was just
Oh
like
yeah.
I couldn't stay awake. I couldn't keep my eyes open wearing them, because it's amazing how just the stimulus of a laptop or a cell phone, that light, that blue light at 9 at night or 10 at night, tells your brain, "Hey, it's noon. Stay awake, stay awake." And then people wonder why they have insomnia at one. So they're up till 1 in the morning. It's because they keep looking at their cell phone. And so I've got that app on my phone that minimizes the blue light, and I have a that computer program that like makes your monitor turn yellow basically as the sun sets, which is a good reminder to me that I should just get up anyway and stop working, because if the sun's setting, I should not still be in the office. Um, but yeah, you're right. Something as simple as making sure that making sleep be a priority in our health, as important or more important than going to the gym, because it's in recovery, it's in sleep time that our body's actually building the healthy muscle, and so it would defeat the whole point of going to the gym for weight loss. or for building muscle because both happen while we're sleeping, right?
Exactly, exactly. Sleep is critical, like we said, for and really not just strength and muscle gain, but also for fat loss too. I mean, your hunger hormones and your metabolism are not going to be efficient if you're not getting any sleep. If anything, your hunger hormones are going to be, erratic, and you're going to be extremely hungry, and you're going to be more likely to overeat, and you're going to have changes in blood sugar volatility if you're not getting enough sleep. So sleep is really important to
Mm.
really both goals, whether it be strength gain or fat loss. But yeah, outside of the exercise program we talked about and sleep, then kind of going back to the basics like we talked about with the supplementation, taking your creatine, taking your protein if necessary, getting some enough good essential fatty acids and good saturated fat in your diet. From a nutrition standpoint, I generally recommend for most people to use a tool called Chronometer to really just kind of log their food for a few days at least, or maybe a week, and just get a sense of where they might be deficient. Deficient in their macronutrients as well as their micronutrients. What nutrients, maybe they thought they're eating, 30% carbs, 30% protein, 40% fat, but really it's kind of, 60% carbs, and that doesn't align with their goals. So you got to look at something like that to get a clear picture of your macronutrients, as well as, the thing I like about chronometers, it'll also show you your micronutrients. Are you really deficient in a certain B vitamin? Are you really deficient in magnesium? Didn't know it. It can be really, it can provide a lot of awareness, just simply by logging your food in Chronometer. And I believe it's free, so it's worth going in there into that tool on that website and just logging your food at least for 3 to 7 days.
And could one just Google chronometer to find that website?
Yeah, I believe it's Chronometer, chronometer.com. I believe that's their website. And that's a really useful tool for somebody who wants to just get a clear picture of how they're eating and if it's the right diet, then they can try that. There's obviously a ton of different types of diets that are out there, like intermittent fasting, different other types of fasting, ketogenic diets. So a lot of things that are popular right now, and, if somebody wants to experiment with it, I'm all for it. But again, just monitor how you feel and use tools like Chronometer to make sure you're not becoming deficient, because it's very easy to become, deficient and depleted with many of these diets. So yeah, I would recommend using a tool like that just to build awareness.
Very cool. And for the person, either the man or woman who has excess weight and they've found it difficult to burn the fat or to lose weight. Of course, the best weight loss is slow and steady for, long-term results. What would they, so let's say they buy your BFR bands, what should they do to optimize their healthy, sustainable weight loss?
Yeah, so if they want to see slow and steady, continual weight loss, one of the things I love about the BFR bands, from a psychological perspective, is I believe it kind of provide that smallest conceivable unit for change. The famous Stanford professor BJ Fogg talks all about micro habits and how to make change. And I think one of the examples he gives is like, if you want to, get into a habit of flossing, then just make the commitment to floss one tooth every night. And I always found that interesting because, most people would think, oh, that's pointless, it's a waste of time, and it's just such human nature to think that, okay, if I can't go to the gym today and do my hour workout, then I might as well not go at all.
Yep.
And I think that's where your work ethic will work against you rather than for you most of the time. If you only think your only option is to go to the gym and do a normal routine, a traditional 60 to 90-minute routine, rather than thinking that, okay, maybe just today I'm just going to commit to doing, 5 push-ups, whatever it may be, just
Mm-hmm.
something. So, and the whole reason you're doing it is, that the 5 push-ups are not going to get the results you want. You're doing it to try to ingrain a new habit. So you're doing it with the intent that, okay, this is my smallest conceivable unit for change, and this unit is going to grow and accumulate over time. And so I'll start with 1 push-up today, but tomorrow I'm going to do 10, and next week I'll do 20, and next week I'll go to the gym for an hour. So BFR, because by virtue of it being so non-threatening, because you don't have to lift heavy weight, like we talked about, you can lift body weight, you can lift 5 pound dumbbells, 2 pound dumbbells, because of the virtue of that you're lifting with very, very light weight. It's not threatening. For most people, including myself, I've been lifting heavy for, over a decade, and I still mentally have to get kind of pumped up to go to the gym to lift heavy. You have to get psyched up because it's threatening to the brain. If we talk about kind of primal instincts, it's threatening to put yourself under a heavy load that could crush you, that could hurt you and injure yourself. And your brain's primary job is to keep you safe and prevent injury. So from a kind of a primal standpoint, BFR is not threatening. And so it could become that smallest conceivable unit where someone says, you know what, I'm not really feeling up to going to the gym today, or I'm not really feeling up to doing the workout that I had planned because, maybe whatever circumstances unfolded that day, they're just not feeling up to it. Instead of just giving up and, getting stuck in that trap they get stuck in every year where they set the same New Year's resolution, never accomplish it. Instead of that happening again, now they have another tool in their tool belt called BFR where they can say, I'm just going to put these on my legs and I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to, put these on my arms and I'm going to do a few push-ups, or I'm going to put them on my legs and do some lunges and squats for 5 minutes, and that's it. And by virtue of it not being threatening and actually feeling good, then I feel like it allows people to create that first domino in their series of that domino reaction of change. And one of my favorite quotes is from a guy, Pavel Tsatsouline. He said that your workout should leave you with more than what it takes out of you. And I think for most people, it's the opposite. They go to the gym and they leave feeling worse than when they
Mm-hmm.
got there. They feel,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, I'm exhausted. They do a hard leg day and they're destroyed for the whole weekend. And they're like, oh my God, I have no energy to do anything. And so I think for most people, it's kind of the opposite. And so I always thought that was an interesting quote because I always kind of think about that as my goal with my workout, is that if I'm not enjoying it, if it doesn't feel, of course, it's going to feel some discomfort, no pain, no gain, right? You have to have some level of discomfort and specific, like increasing size or strength. It's not going to be painless per se, but you should feel good. Like someone who goes for a long run, they start to have maybe those endorphins coming in to make it feel good. For anyone who works out often, they know what I'm talking about. It feels weird to not work out if you have a habit of working out frequently. So, for people who don't have that habit, it feels weird to go work out. But for people who make it a habit and do it often, then it feels strange to not be consistent and go work out. And it almost becomes addictive because, again, so that's kind of the end result. That's the end goal you always want from your exercise routine. If your goal is weight loss, your goal is to really, find a routine where you feel invigorated by your workout, not, completely depleted all the time.
That is such great advice. One more case study, and then I've got a few technical questions for those who want to buy your and how to use your BFR. For someone who is more fragile, maybe they're recovering from an injury or they've had a chronic illness, or someone who's a senior citizen who is not active, what would be the best way to start using the BFR bands to achieve good results?
The easiest way would be to put them on and just go for a walk. Like we talked about earlier, the walk studies generated such great results. And for, people who are a little bit older, the most important thing for them is, having good balance and not falling. I mean, falling is like the greatest risk for mortality
Mm-hmm.
amongst many things that, you want to have good stability and mobility, especially in the lower body when you're older. So simply putting these bands on the upper legs and going for an easy, leisurely walk for 20 minutes could be really, really effective. And you could do that outside. You could do that at the gym. You could do it at home if you have a treadmill at home. It doesn't have to be complicated. So, it could be something simple like that. They could also just put them on their legs and just do simple flexion and extension. They could take their feet and do simple, kind of curls of the toes and extend the ankles and raise the feet. So you could do movements where you're contracting muscles in the lower body without actually lifting any weights or without doing any squats or any traditional exercise. Because again, when you're putting the bands on, as soon as you start doing muscle contraction, you're starting to get the benefits from the BFR.
Very cool. And do they put them on under their pants or over their pants? I mean, for anyone, because you had mentioned one of the workouts would be, for example, the ones who want to gain muscle. At the end of their workout, they put the BFR bands on to do some reps with very light weights. Is that just over their workout pants, or do they have to go to the bathroom and take off their pants
No,
and put the bands on?
these can be, they're designed, the ones we have at least are designed to be worn either. Some people like them more discreet and they wear them underneath and they can do that. Some people like to put them over their legs because they want to just do it quickly. They don't want to have to go and to the bathroom or locker room and change or whatever it may be. So you can really do it either or. I guess it really kind of depends on what your workout attire looks like and what that is. But for most people, especially if we're talking about upper body and lower body, when you're wearing them on the upper arms or upper legs, you can wear them over under the clothing. And our Pro X bands, like we talked about earlier, are really designed to be worn. They're designed mainly for upper body, but they're really designed to be worn under or over clothing. Some of our other bands, you really want to wear them over clothing. Usually we recommend wearing them over your shirt sleeve, so that way you prevent any kind of pinching because of the way the buckles work. But with this specific new design, there's really no issue with that because the buckle is beveled, and so there should be no issue of pinching or any worry about the skin getting pinched as you tighten the band.
Really cool. I'm on your website, which is bfrshop.com, and of course, all the links are going to be in the show notes of today's podcast, so learntruehealth.com. They're really affordable. I mean, this is like right in the price range where pretty much anyone who's going to a gym already would have no problem buying something for $20 or $30. I'm seeing there's even bands that are $17, but just depending on there's the one that goes right below the buttocks, and that's about almost $40. And so there's several different bands. If someone's just starting out, is there just one band that they could put on their arms and legs, or is there you have to have a different band for arms and a different band for legs? Walk us through. We're all new to you. We're brand new customers. Walk us through what we should buy to get started today.
Yeah, so for most people, even though our Pro X bands are really designed for arms, for most people, a lot of people ask me, can they use them for legs? And I've actually found that most customers do use them for legs, even though we didn't really design them that way. Most of them successfully use them for both arms and legs. So if you're looking for kind of an inexpensive, efficient way to have some bands and just get into BFR training, then the Pro X bands would be a great way to start if you want to use it for upper or lower body. If you want something that's a little bit more advanced, like if you're maybe a little more of a, avid gym goer, you're a gym rat, you want to grow your legs, you want to grow your lower body, then I'd recommend probably our double wraps, or we have something called the quad wraps, which is just a longer version. And those are a little bit wider, which means that it helps you achieve more pressure. So again, when we earlier we talked about, optimal pressure, what does that feel like? Well, from a perceived tightness standpoint, it should feel like 70%. So not 100%, because if it feels 100%, then perceived tightness wise, that feels like you can't go any tighter, that you've pretty much cut off all blood flow. You don't want to do that. You want it to feel, somewhere a little more than half. So 70% in the studies, they actually studied using perceived tightness as a scale for, how to indicate how tight to wrap their bands. And so 70% was kind of the sweet spot. So, if you can't achieve 70% with the Pro X bands on your legs, then we recommend using something like the double wraps or the quad wraps to achieve higher pressure because they are longer and wider. But that would be the best place to start, Pro X bands for at least the arms, and then maybe the double wraps or quad wraps for lower body.
I see one called Beast Mode, the bundle of arm bands, leg bands, and the full body workout.
Yep,
Would that be
exactly.
for someone who is already a gym goer? They could get the Beast Mode bundle.
Yeah, it's designed and kind of marketed that way to somebody who's a little more of the gym goer. But really, if somebody just wants a good deal to have, armbands, leg bands, we have a full, like you said, full digital workout program. It's a series of videos where, I take you through every muscle group and how to train every muscle group with the bands. And it's just a really efficient, package rather than buying everything separately. It's a very inexpensive way to purchase the whole package. So if you're somebody who's even the beginner and you just want to, just kind of go all out with this and just get the right bands that you need for both upper and lower body, and you know that you're going to start doing this form of training, you want to do it correctly, then the Beast Mode bundle would be a good package to get because it's the most efficient.
Now, I see on your website you have something called BFR course. Is that for like health professionals and personal trainers, or is that for lay people?
It's really for both. I mean, we designed it for trainers. It actually provides continuing education credits, CECs for trainers. and it'll give them, almost half their requirements. If you're a trainer, you have to get a certain amount of CECs, every 2 to 4 years. And if you have NASM or NSCA, our BFR online course, which is fully online, fully digital, you can do it from home, gives them basically almost half their requirement. So instead of having to go to a 3-day weekend workshop somewhere, they could just be sitting at home learning about BFR training and how to use it with specific populations, the mechanisms of action, how it affects growth hormone and bone, all the whole 9 yards. So we dive in deep, and it's actually a course that I developed with a medical doctor, a guy named Dr. Charles Williams. Me and him developed this together and developed most of this content together, and we're continually adding to it. So the BFR course is a really, really useful tool for someone who's really serious about kind of mastering BFR training and incorporating the right way. It's kind of like you talked about earlier about your friend that who went to Z Health as a patient and then essentially became a practitioner. It's kind of the same thing. Is we designed it for somebody who's really serious about it and really wants to go down the rabbit hole and really understand how to best utilize it with themselves and maybe even clients if they have them. Then this is a great course. If you're a professional, it's definitely a great course.
Very cool. So the beginner person that just wants to get started and try it, you're saying the Pro X edition BFR bands, just pull to tighten, those ones that are red and black. Those are the
Yeah.
great ones to start with.
Yeah, if they go to bfrshop.com/pro-x, bfrshop.com/pro-x, that'll take them straight to our Pro X bands there that they can see all more information about the Pro X bands specifically, as well as our endorsement from Dr. Williams. He talks about a little bit of the science behind BFR training, as well as customer testimonials. I mean, these are all real testimonials. The customer testimonials, we didn't pay for any of those or anything like that. These are all people who have used the product and are just raving about the product.
Do you have any testimonials off the top of your head? Are there any stories of success you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, I've had some, let's see, most of the people who are, sharing their testimonials are usually people who are trying to gain strength and size. So I've had a guy who posted recently, I can't remember if it was on our Instagram or maybe in our private Facebook group. The guy was talking about how he, struggled to gain size in his arms, and he started incorporating BFR training. He's already gained, I think he said, an inch in his arms after about 8 weeks. So if you think about it, for most people, I think an inch doesn't seem like a whole lot. For gaining size, that's a lot. To gain an inch in your biceps after just 8 weeks of doing lightweight training is pretty phenomenal. So that one really stood out to me. That was more of a recent one that we got. I had another one where the guy, I can't remember if he was maybe either an amputee or maybe he just had a leg injury, so he couldn't do a whole lot. This is somebody who he can't go to the gym and do heavy squats. He can't go do traditional training. He's been incorporating BFR training to be able to gain his strength and mobility back. And he said it's allowed him to essentially, gain size and strength in his lower body like he used to with traditional training. So they're seeing progress and they're seeing, and they're seeing consistency and they're feeling good. So those are typically the types of stories that I get. Those are kind of the two that stick out to me more recently. The most common ones are just people talking about how they're gaining size and they're leaning up. Because the thing that you'll notice right away when you use the bands, it gives you a pump. If you go and you lift at the gym, anyone who's doing weight training at the gym is actually doing occlusion training. They're doing BFR training whether they know it or not. They're internally occluding. As you drive blood to your limbs when you're doing weight training, you're actually swelling and you're pushing the fluid into the muscle, which is going to create that internal occlusion to a certain extent. So they're already achieving occlusion training to a certain extent when they're achieving that pump. And when people do BFR training, they love the fact that they get that pump because it makes them feel good. Psychologically and physically, it feels good to pump the muscle up with blood flow. But a lot of what I'm hearing is that most people, when they do traditional training, they gain the pump and then they lose it. They go to the gym, they look good while they're at the gym, they leave, they swell back down, they look normal again. And they're like, oh, wow, I wish I could keep that. With BFR training, many of the customers have said that they keep that effect. It lasts, and it doesn't just last for a few hours, it lasts for days. And as long as they keep doing it, it continues to last, and the results begin to stick as they start to see true physiological changes in actual muscle size and muscle density. Then those results become more permanent. So it's really interesting to see what kind of results I'm seeing for people across the board And these are people with a wide variety of backgrounds. Some of them are, are the gym rats that they're already big guys, and now they're adding this to their routine and seeing phenomenal results just lifting with light weight. And then you have people on the other end of the spectrum that can't do a whole lot. They're either doing it for rehab, they're doing it, as a beginner, never really having done a whole lot with weight training or heavy weight training before. So it's helping people really achieve desired results for them across, a wide spectrum of client types and body types.
Really cool. I love it. It's very interesting, and I love that, especially for those who are the couch potatoes or maybe they've felt sort of defeated in the past by the gym. It'll really help them to get back into a healthier routine, because something that can strength the speed up the process of building muscle, then it'll just domino from there. Is it true that the more muscle we have, the stronger our metabolism is, because our body is just with the more muscle, it's burning off more calories? Or does the BFR, by using it, increase the metabolism?
Yeah, so when you're doing when you gain muscle, whether it be from traditional training or BFR, gaining muscle mass helps you, like you said, burn more calories. So as you gain muscle mass and lean body mass, you're going to have higher energy demand. You're typically going to be hungrier. If you do a lot of heavy weight training, you're going to be hungrier because your body's burning more naturally. Your basal metabolic rate, which is the energy that your body needs just to live, just at rest, is going to be higher naturally with every pound of muscle that you put on. So gaining muscle mass is important if your goal is, permanent weight loss. If you want to keep the weight off and stay lean and make it a lifestyle, then gaining lean muscle tissue is important. I mean, how you train and the genetics you have and the supplements you take will really dictate, physically how big you get. Because a lot of women will be like, oh, I don't want to get massive. Well, you're not going to get massive because you don't have the testosterone that a male has. You're probably not taking a ton of creatine to gain size and swell the muscle specifically. And you're probably not eating at such a caloric surplus that you're going to gain a lot of size. But when we talk about gaining muscle, we're talking about lean tissue that physically is not going to make you look like a bodybuilder or, look massive per se, but it is going to help you be stronger and burn more calories at rest and be more efficient, which is important in today's day and age because the average person wants to have a flexible diet. They want to be able to, on a Friday night, go out with some friends, have a few drinks, and not feel like they just destroyed a week's worth of progress, or be able to have pizza once in a while and go off their diet and still not feel like they just sabotage all their results. So having a flexible diet and being able to have that kind of lifestyle flexibility is important to most people. And if it is important for you, then I would highly recommend that you're incorporating some kind of weight training to gain lean body mass.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, this has been eye-opening and a great topic, because I'm a really big fan of building muscle mass for anyone of all ages, and but it's not easy for anyone of all ages or all fitness levels, and you're bringing in something that helps it be easy for those that would likely be unable to traditionally lifting heavy weights. So that is quite exciting. I'm really I guess this is, you're just at the pioneering stage, because I imagine in a matter of years, every single gym is going to have your BFR bands in them. It just makes sense because they want to get results for their clients. So it's only a matter of time whether your product becomes a household name.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. We're starting to see them pop up in more and more gyms. I know more trainers are using them with clients. We have chiropractors and physical therapists using them with patients. It's becoming, more widespread, and it's cool to see that, like you said earlier, it's not an expensive device. I mean, our most popular bands are about $30. And we do have some higher end bands we have now called our signature series bands, which are in, a couple $100s, still not in the, 2 to 4,000 range like most of the devices on the market, but they're a few $100. And for that, you get armbands, you get leg bands, you get a hand pump that looks like a blood pressure gauge, which it essentially is. And they have valves that basically hold the pressure in the band. So you hook these like quick connect valves to the hand pump, when you slide this thing onto your arm, and they're inflatable, just like a blood pressure cuff, except they have the optimal width of 2 inches for arms, 3 inches for legs. You pump them up, you quick disconnect it. It has a little button to disconnect, and the valve keeps the air in the band so you can work out. And then when you're done, you hook them back up, release the air, and take them off. And so we've designed those so that way they can be more standardized for somebody, who's like a professional, wants to have something more standardized, maybe for insurance purposes or just to be more specific with specific patients. That can be really useful. Or I have many just average gym goers. They just want to be able to train with the best tools that are out there, and they like to have the Signature Series bundle for that reason. Same with many trainers. They want to be able to work with, their clients. They look at it as basically an investment to be able to use it with their clients, because this is a tool that they're going to use with so many different clients that it becomes a no-brainer.
That makes sense. And you said before you ever came with this on the market, it was thousands of dollars to have these tools for professionals, and now the professionals can get it at a fraction of the cost from you.
Exactly. And those tools that are out there, I mean, again, I don't want to discredit some of those tools.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of those tools out there. Some of these expensive devices, they're anywhere between a few $1,000s and upwards of $4,000 to $5,000. And so again, the problem with that is that the average Joe is not going to buy that. They're not going to, if somebody who wants to just use it by themselves to gain some strength, gain some size, gain some mobility, they're not going to buy that. They might, depending on the circumstance, they might go see a physical therapist or a practitioner that maybe utilizes that device with patients, which, is not necessarily it's not widespread. It's not at every clinic. But in most cases, it just reduces the it increases the barrier for most people to use it. It reduces their odds of actually being able to incorporate this form of training, and that's what I wanted to really mitigate. I wanted to make it easier and more accessible for the average person to be able to incorporate this form of training, and I didn't want people fumbling around with rubber bands or fumbling around with ace bandages or necessarily medical tourniquets that are cheap and flimsy. I wanted them to have something that was going to be able to be effective but also last, like we talked about. I want it to be something that they can keep in their gym bag for many years and still get value out of it and still get use out of it. So that's the main thing I like about our bands, is that we've tried to make it as easy and as affordable and accessible to a wide population.
Very cool. And I noticed that a free ebook on how to use the bands, how to work out with the bands, is included with each purchase, so that people can get started right away and they're not left there going, "Oh, great! I know I just listened to this interview, but what do I do?" So you give some instructions so we're not gonna be confused.
Exactly. Yeah. The Pro X bands come with a free copy of our BFR book, which talks about the history, how it works, as well as comes with a sample workout program for every muscle group. And we'll give you in that book a program for, basically a 5 or 6 day workout program.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this information. I'm really excited because I know I've actually been contacted before by a few listeners have said, how do I gain muscle? So this is excellent. I look forward to hearing from the listeners. If you buy those who buy the BFR bands, please email me, Ashley@learntruehealth.com, and let me know your experience. I'd love to hear about the results you get. I think it's always cool to hear about results after a listener hears a guest on the show. And because I do get these great emails where people say, like, I no longer am diabetic, I no longer have, my hormones are back into balance, or I had infertility and now I don't. Like, I get these awesome emails from people letting me know that because they heard a specific guest, it made a big difference in their life. And so I imagine in the coming months, we'll be getting emails about the BFR bands and the results our listeners are getting. Is there anything you'd like to say to the Learn to Health listener to wrap up today's interview?
Yeah, I think the main thing is, really just thinking about what's that smallest conceivable unit for change that they can make. Whether it's BFR training, whether it's their sleep habits, maybe it's their recovery. What's that one thing that they can do tomorrow to get them closer to their goals, and just to start implementing that one small thing, and give themselves basically permission to do a little bit less.
Very cool. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks again. Thanks for having me.
If you're interested in trying out Kusha's bands and seeing the improvement in your physical fitness for yourself, You will be happy to know that he has given all of our listeners a coupon code, so use LTH as the coupon code at checkout for a very generous discount, and they're already really affordable bands. I've ordered mine. They're coming in the mail. My husband and I are really excited to give them a try. I'm going to start out by wearing them on my arms as we go for hikes because I use hiking poles, and my husband's really looking forward to putting them on his legs as we hike, so we'll trade them off. The first half of the hike I'll wear them, the second half of the hike he'll wear them, and we'll let you know. I'll let you know how they work for both of us. But it's very interesting. The science is all there, and I just know so many of you are so interested in gaining muscle mass for a variety of reasons: for more strength, for more endurance, for the metabolism, for just the long-term health benefits and the stability and the balance. So really for anyone throughout their adult life, this seems to make a lot of sense. So you will love checking out the bands. Go to BFR Shop, that stands for blood flow restriction. So BFRshop.com, and then use LTH, Learn True Health, LTH as the coupon code to get your discount. And please email me, Ashley at Learn True Health. Let me know as you use the bands. I want to hear from you. I want to hear how they're working for you. And I just love tapping into these really cool techniques that will allow us to all gain better health and fitness. Excellent. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for sharing the show with those that you love and those that you want to help make a difference in their life. Have yourself a fantastic rest of your day. Do you feel like you're missing something? Are you searching for the right answers to solve your health issues? Do you feel like you should have more energy and mental clarity? With everything you're doing for your health, you may be missing one key component. Our body needs 90 essential nutrients every day to function optimally: 60 minerals, 12 amino acids, 2 fatty acids, and 16 vitamins each and every day. Because of the farming practices over the last 100 years, most of our food has 60% fewer vitamins and minerals compared to just 50 years ago. So if you aren't eating 8 cups of a variety of fruits and vegetables each day, you may be missing some of your essential nutrients. These are the raw building blocks the body needs to create new healthy tissue, healthy hormones, balanced digestive system, strong muscles, bones and joints, and maintain an optimal functioning nervous system. Especially if you're experiencing more stress, or if you've gone through an illness like an infection, that takes more resources. So if you're not consuming more vitamin C and more of all the 16 vitamins and all the 60 minerals when you're going through more stress, either physical stress, emotional stress, mental stress, those stressors take more nutrients to kind of survive those bumps in the road in life. And over time, that whittles away, that kind of depletes our nutrient tanks, our stores in our body. Without these 90 essential nutrients, things start to break down. Now, you've experienced these breakdowns. Maybe you get migraines, maybe you're exhausted, maybe your hormones are out of balance, your digestion's out of balance, or you have some aches and pains. Maybe you've even been diagnosed with something. You have a series of symptoms, and if those symptoms all look like something, then we can diagnose it, right? That's what MDs can do. MDs will treat these breakdowns with drugs and mask your symptoms. But if your body has a nutrient deficiency, no amount of drugs will fix the problem. 7 years ago, I embarked on a journey to cure my diabetes, infertility, PCOS, high blood pressure, and chronic adrenal fatigue. I felt like I was a mess. Through my research, I found a company that made natural supplements to address these nutrient needs. They formulated their supplements to exceed all standards of quality. Their minerals are the most bioavailable and absorbed by the body that I have ever found. After getting on their protocols for healthy hormones and blood sugar, along with their dietary recommendations for better health, I reversed my type 2 diabetes, I reversed my infertility, I no longer had high blood pressure, my energy and vitality came back, and after 6 years of trying to get pregnant with my husband before we found these supplements, once we got on these supplements, we were able to conceive our wonderful, healthy son, who's now 3 years old, and he is amazing. And we would have never had that had we not found this company. Speaking of our son, he's also taking these supplements for optimal health. His pediatrician thinks they're amazing. If you'd like to give these supplements a try and see for yourself if you're experiencing a nutrient deficiency, please go to takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Their health coaches are phenomenal. I personally know all of them. They're amazing people. And I just want you to know, as my listener, I feel like I need to protect my listeners. I would never promote anything that I didn't 100% believe in and I didn't feel was healthy or good for you. I feel like you're my tribe, and I'm sharing this information. In fact, for the last 2 years, the only reason why I've been doing this podcast is so that I can help as many people as possible gain their health back. And so the health coaches at takeyoursupplements.com, I really trust that they will make sure that you're well taken care of. They will work with you to help determine the best protocol for your nutrient needs and work within your budget. They will also help to implement a holistic protocol that includes supporting a healthy diet and lifestyle. Go to takeyoursupplements.com, fill out the form, and one of their health coaches will get back to you really shortly. And then you guys can schedule a time to talk on the phone, and they will work with you to help you dial in all your nutrient needs. I really look forward to hearing about your experience with them. Please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me in our Facebook group. Go to Facebook, search Learn True Health, and join our group. Let me know what you think about the wonderful health coaches at takeyoursupplements.com. And by the way, when you go to takeyoursupplements.com and you get assigned to a health coach, they're your health coach. You're not going to keep getting a different person every time. You get one person, and they work with you and they hold your hand. For months down the road. They're there for you to support you month after month while you're on your nutrient protocol, and they're helping you dial in your nutrient needs. They're really wonderful like that. So I know you'll enjoy your experience with them, and I'd love to hear about your experience with them. Please feel free to, you can email me as well, ashley@learntruehealth.com. I love hearing success stories. Like I said, I've been working with a supplement company for my own health for the last 7 years, and I've reversed so many issues. I love sharing this information because I think that many of you will be able to resolve your issues with nutrition, just like I've seen many people do. With that said, go to takeyoursupplements.com, fill out your information, and a health coach is very excited to start working with you and helping you get your health back.